A lot of global conversations about China get trapped in politics and ideology, but there's another lens that's equally important, technology in action, what people actually use, how business actually operate, and what the rest of the world can learn. Today, we'll explore the lens through a tech with soul perspective, not just what's possible, but what gets adopted at scale and what it does to humans, culture, and the future. Our guest today is the person to talk about this. She's naturalized Chinese entrepreneur, the founder of Chozan, the author of 11 books on digital China, and recognized by Thinkers 50 as a guru on fast evolving trends in China. Let's welcome the one and only Ashley Dudarenok. Ashley, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vivi. It's so exciting to be here.
I'm so impressed by your story. You were born in Russia, grew up around the collapse of the communism, and then came to China to study and ended up building a whole business ecosystem, an empire there, helping Fortune 1000 leaders learn for and from China. So let's start at the beginning. What inspired you to go to China in the first place?
I moved to mainland China when I was 17 years old, and I moved, let's say, across the globe. So the question would be, what motivates a person to move across the globe at the age of 17?
Yes.
Typically, it's two things. Either it's love or money. Which one, Vivi, do you think it was?
Oh my goodness. I think it's bigger than that. Maybe it's both, but like 17 years old, you are very brave to cross the globe and then make all these decisions to pursue your dreams.
It was love. You're right.
Oh,
Yeah, it,
yes,
it was, it
yes.
was, it was. And a boyfriend of mine at the time, he was studying Chinese, and we thought it would be a great place to, go to together and basically explore that part of the world. I was born on the border of Russia and China, so we did have exposure to obviously Asians, Japanese, the Koreans, the Chinese, etc. But I never, never as a child, let's say growing up, right? I thought that I would end up living in mainland China. Also, as I was younger, I moved to, I've been in New Zealand and I was studying abroad. So it was never really on my agenda. But then because of that boyfriend, because of that love, this was a pivotal decision in my life. And then what happened? At 17, I was standing in Chongqing. By then, population-wise, the largest city in the world. And I was completely at awe. It's 34 million people. It was extremely bustling. It was very unique. Right now, we call it the cyberpunk city, and you can read Wikipedia and Economist articles about it. But back then, it wasn't the case. So, in other words, I came to Chongqing, I saw what China is going through, and I said, you know what? This is the place to be. It was fast, it was furious, it was exciting. There was this energy that anything is possible. And that's what got me to stay and build the future.
Wow. Amazing story. I know that you are romantic. That's great. Love is always the driving force. And so when you first arrived, let's just take us back. What was the biggest cultural shock that you have? I know that there's a lot of people in Chongqing, but for 17 years old, what was the biggest cultural shock?
Yes, I was thrown into the real China. And what I mean by real China, it wasn't as, let's say, international or as polished in the eyes of the world, let's say, as Beijing or Shanghai or even right now, obviously, Shenzhen. I mean, Chongqing, for those people that know, it's situated right in the center of China, right? It used to be kind of a part of the Sichuan, and Sichuan is also one of the poorest areas of China with a lot of farmers. So, for example, when I arrived in Chongqing, which was nearly 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, we still had bang bang men. Who are bang bang men? These are the guys that are standing there with bamboo sticks next to supermarkets. And his sole job is to help you carry your groceries to your home and doorstep. And that would cost you between 2 to 3 RMB to carry your groceries. We had a lot of that, and because there was this constant influence from the countryside, some of the cultural things were, of course, a bit unusual. For example, we would have children, walking down the let's say supermarket lanes and then stopping, and they would have those split pants. They would just sit down and do their business. I would be completely shocked and terrified. Not to see the child doing that, but to see a cleaner very calmly coming right after this child and calmly cleaning everything up. So that was very unusual. And, as a young person, I reacted with, oh my God, what's happening here? And it took me some time to digest. I was a guest in that culture. I had to be open. I had to understand the background. I had to see the real Sichuan that was coming through Chongqing as a huge upward mobility of China was happening in front of my eyes. So I don't have that cultural shock anymore. First of all, China has, of course, progressed immensely. But beyond that, I think it's also you need to be a little bit humbled by the sheer force of the country, by the speed with which it's developing, by the culture that is 5,000 years old, and all this put together. You just cannot be arrogantly observing from the outside and judging and placing any kind of expectation on what is going on. So I think with wisdom, time, and also experience, that realization came.
A lot of people outside of China, when they first came to China, they see the rough side of it. But also, there's the other side. It's fast growing. People are so hardworking, so friendly. I love your perspective of being open and humble and just to take that all in. Now you live in Hong Kong, but you stay in that region for more than 10 years or nearly 20 years. I heard you mentioned that you are now all in on China. You are the go-to person for doing business and working with the Chinese. Was there a specific switch moment that made you decide that?
Yes, as I was again in Chongqing, it was the time, 2005, 6, 7, 8. This was the time when China was leapfrogging technology, leapfrogging when it comes to innovation and so much more. And I saw the writing on the wall early. So, for example, when the rest of the world was still contemplating where to go with e-commerce, whether Amazon could actually sell something beyond the books. China already had, unfortunately, SARS. And after SARS, a lot of people were purchasing anything from computers to pens online via platforms such as Taobao, right? We had social media, and it very quickly evolved into social commerce. So when again in the West, we were still wondering whether it's just about kitty cat pictures. In China, we were, actually not just doing live streaming. It was before then. So all this leapfrogging made me realize that the future is really being built in Asia. We have the most integrated manufacturing ecosystem. We have the most digitally savvy consumers. We have also a lot of opportunities to test real life, real time, real products and iterate at amazing speed. So when I saw that firsthand in the first, let's say 2, 3, 4 years, there was never a question for me whether I want to leave this region. And for me to be able to be that bridge between mainland China and the world, I also wanted to be in Hong Kong because I love the city. I just fell in love with it. I love the South China. I love the climate. I love the infrastructure. I love the food. So I decided to have a base here and later on, obviously, build businesses around it. So now we do have offices in Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Hong Kong. And I think that realization that China is going places and Asia is going places and the world is changing that started 20 years ago, that realization never left. It just became stronger. So I'm excited to be part of that shift into a different state of being and into the future.
That's wonderful. Now you're one of the biggest ambassadors of doing business in China. And I know that you run the Chozan tours, right, which are the China learning tours for Fortune 1000 leaders and some of the smartest business people in the world, but they think they understand China. But what is the biggest shot they tend to have based on your experience when they actually land there?
The reason why people come to China these days have shifted immensely. Let's say 10 years ago, whoever came to let's explore what's happening in China from the global teams, and I'm talking about very senior level board -1, they would be coming here because, they had to understand China to be in that market, to, support their local team better. So they were learning for China, right? And right now, majority of senior leaders, they come to see China as a laboratory for the world. They come to see and learn for their global applications and implications. And they want to get inspired. They want to see how things actually work. And that is very, very unique. So when it comes to the shocks, I would say there are 3 typical shocks. The first shock is always the speed. So it's not just the idea of the speed, but it's really coming from the ground. It's the texture of that speed, I would say. So you look at the group, for example, of executives that come to Shenzhen and they look at product iterations, right? The product development. It takes any complex product less than 49 days to be on the market. If you're willing to pay for prototypes fast, you can get it in 4 hours. So the prototype in 4 hours, your full business up and running in 49 days. It's not 49 weeks, yeah, it's 49 days. Once they see it, and I saw executives from very senior, let's say European companies, government, let's say representatives from various firms and from various countries, they come in and they cannot imagine that if in the morning they place an order and they're willing to pay for 3D printing of every part, which is going to be expensive, they can get a working prototype of something as cool as a drone or as a mobile phone or as whatever device in 4 hours in the afternoon, right? So that's number one. Number two is integration. They're always very uniquely surprised because in the West, so to say, there is a distinction between digital and physical worlds. They're separate channels and everybody's trying to connect them. So in China, they were never separate. The digital and physical, they were built to be together. So ultimately, it's not just your omni-channel strategy, it is the omni-channel reality. And they see all those super apps and they see all those, whatever it might be. Previously, it was QR codes. Right now, we have like palm payments and whatever. And they do feel, I think, quite impressed. And the other one is a consumer shock, for sure. Mm. Chinese consumers, the most, and in my view, the most demanding in the world. They are the most informed. They are the most digitally native consumers on the planet. So when top executives actually see how the market reacts to new technology, to apps, to new iterations, to the robots walking down the street, I think that is quite impressive. They often feel that this is not something that you can learn just from a report or from a news story. Before you feel it, before you think about it, before you experience that, it's nothing.
Wow, we all heard about the China speed, but once they get to see it and experience firsthand, it's still very different. What is your tour like? What does the CEO see, feel, and experience?
Absolutely. So typically we work with the corporate clients, which means they send their top leaders, let's say Coca-Cola, they internally are going through a digital transformation, right? So they don't wake up one morning and say, let's go to China, but they are, for example, working on 3 things this year where they want to become an autonomous organization. They want to work on their middle management and see how middle managers can actually implement, let's say, AI agents. And they do, let's say, some supply chain innovation. So if these are their 3 top priorities, then they give us access to the top leaders that within the company are realizing that journey, that actually implement it. And back in the day, they would probably send them to Harvard Business School, Duke University, London Business School, whatever, for a 3-day or 5-day workshop when the professor stands there and, talks about case studies and, and all this group work, which is absolutely excellent. But today, more and more companies want to have immersive experiential learning. So they say, guys, instead of going to London, we are going these days to Hangzhou. We're dropping you off there for 5 days, and then it starts. There is a combination of company visits. Company visits in China are very different from Silicon Valley visit. When you go to Google, everybody's excited to see you. There's a pre-prepared tour. If you are at a senior level, they will give you somebody senior to talk to, etc. Because Google has a KPI of branding, of bringing that awareness of their company to the rest of the world. Chinese companies are very different. There is a tour to see the showroom, but ultimately the real conversations happen when you speak with senior leaders. Sometimes it's chatter house rules, sometimes it's off the premises, but ultimately there's a company visit. There's always senior leaders from these companies that we can, invite and chat deeper. Then there are experts. Then there's experiential thing. Like, for example, in Shanghai, we can go to robotic training ground where more than 70 companies submit their humanoid robots and other robots in the real world kind of application, and we can take over the whole training ground and play with those robots, actually try to use them. In some cases, some factory visits, for example, not complete dark factories, but near dark factories, visits where you can see, okay, how the dark factory plus supply chain are actually collaborating. How does the floor look when there are no people, etc. So, and through it all, there's a golden thread that loops back to their company. So they're not there just seeing random firms, random people. They are there to understand better, to see, to get inspired how they can work their digital transformation in their firm and get inspired by China's examples of successes and failures and see, hey, what can we bring back and how can we do better? And on top of that, there's of course the cultural element. There is the fun element, the team building element very often because they are thrown into China together. So all of that makes an experience quite fun.
There are lots of media coverage that frames China as the copycat or surveillance state, especially in the US. China is seen as the biggest threat or competitor. You're ahead of curve in China. You see firsthand how the technology is evolving. So those narratives actually feel a little bit too simplistic. So from your experience, what's the most accurate framework that is suitable for understanding what is actually happening there?
When approaching China, you need to have a few filters. So the first filter, whatever it is you've seen with your eyes, whatever you've seen, you've heard somebody, you know very well seen with their eyes, it is very likely a part of the truth. The second filter is you need to watch what is being deployed, not just something that's been announced. A lot of things, a lot of directions in China happening. And I think in the West, there are two types of reporting. One type of reporting is often not very objective because there's a constant geopolitical filter to it. But the other type of reporting is extremely optimistic. I'll give you an example. For example, robot cafes, right? There are a ton of or this kind of TMC, which is Chinese traditional medicine robots that are deployed in clinics. Do they exist? Absolutely, they exist. But some of the media or some of the bloggers, for virality reasons, they say as if wherever you go, literally like every toilet in Beijing has urine test robot. I mean, and then people arrive into the country, into the city, and they are expecting that. So it's either exaggerated and over the top because they're seeking virality, or it is, again, with this geopolitical filter, which basically makes it sound like whatever's happening in China, it's all government, it's all curated, it's all very, very, kind of red flaggy. And the truth is out there. The truth is completely different and it's multidimensional. So in other words, watch for what's being deployed. And the other filter is, follow the money. Not just any money, but follow the type of money. If government in China, right, says that they're going to do something, they're going to invest in something, they're going to build an infrastructure for an industry to be successful, they're going to do it. 5-year plans are real. So those signals and those filters, once you put them together, I think could give you a quite a rounded, well-rounded understanding of the market. But if you're just reading news, if you're just reading blogs or watching some videos, I think it's only going to always be one side, and a combination is what is the real devil.
Yeah. That's true. That is how people cut through all the noises and then really focus on what is happening. You've written 11 books on digital China. And if you had to give our audience the one chapter insight, the one idea that most people can take from them to understand China's innovation, what would that be?
There is a mini book that I wrote, which is called Innovation Factory. And I think the short summary of the whole book is China did not innovate just by copying. It innovated by deploying, and deploying faster, at larger scale, with more iteration cycles than anyone else. So that idea of a copycat and that brand that China carried for such a long time, I think, yes, from the Western perspective, it's largely true. But from the Chinese perspective, you need to look a little bit deeper into the culture and see that in China, for thousands of years, there has been apprenticeship, which means if I join, for example, Vivi, you are a fantastic woods woman, and I also want to do woods work. So I will follow you, just like in during Renaissance, right? I will follow the master for many years, 7 years, a decade, sometimes longer. And my first job would be doing what? Copying exactly what you do, your
Yeah.
style. So my job as a pupil is to select a master who is really, really good. And then all I do is I follow exactly how you do it. So I copy your style. I copy your, your movements, your version of the world. And then after I graduated from that apprenticeship, then I develop my own style on top of that. And I say, you know what, I'm going to do something differently and I'm going to work differently. So that has been the cultural kind of background against which China started innovating. And yes, a lot of technology, a lot of insights, a lot of that came into the market. And the first initial idea was, okay, how do we learn from the master? Which means how do we create a super perfect copy that is viable? And then on top of it, we start building other applications like WeChat, right? WeChat did not invent messaging, obviously,
Yeah.
but they invented the super app as they started, iterating. They created this huge platform where you can, order food, book doctors, etc. It was really built on that philosophy. So once again, it's not just the copying, it's really about deployment. And innovation for China, it means start, become good, bring it to the market, and then co-create it with consumer. Innovation in, let's say, the West, the collective West, very often means, okay, somebody did A, and I need to do something completely different that has nothing to do with A, and it's super, super unique and super unlike anything else. And I think this is just the cultural kind of mismatch versus anything else.
Yeah, I think that reminds me of like the saying that good artists copy and the great artists steal. And
Steal, they
right?
just
But
steal.
you're right. And they copy, they learn, but then they add their own innovation on top of it. And then they deploy it in certain ways that make sense in economically and they scale. So talking about that, and let's just zoom into the biggest force that's shaping everything nowadays, AI. China is actually competing neck and neck with America in the space of AI. And obviously is deploying AI at also at scale and speed. So for people outside China, it's really hard for them to get this right picture. So what does AI in action look like in daily life in China, from your firsthand experience?
Mm. So I would probably give you three real pictures.
Mm-hmm.
The first is consumer level. So the average Chinese city dweller is living inside an AI layer that they don't think about as AI. For example, we have the Meituan, right? Delivery network.
Mm-hmm.
It uses 50 million daily order. It has 50 million daily orders, and it uses obviously AI to orchestrate the whole ecosystem. The food arrives in 30 minutes. The route algorithms are very nicely planned. Or Douyin recommendation engine. Again, who sees what? On average, every 90 minutes per day, people spend on Douyin. So how are their feeds plugged into not just their life, but their habits? How do they curate the digital living and digital learning and digital shopping, right? So that is the first layer. The second layer is the enterprise layer. And it's quite interesting because it's not just about big tech. Everybody talks about, Alibaba, Tencent, ByteDance, Huawei, etc. And these are huge ecosystems and they're extremely important. They are just like highways that carry the technology, the data, the insights forward. But it's really about the mid market. Chinese manufacturers, for example, are embedding AI into quality control, right? Or their predictive maintenance or supply chain optimizations at a rate that is, for some people, again, alarming, unimaginable, and whatnot. Also, AI penetration, for example, today already in manufacturing is around 45%. And this is just the beginning. So that layer is the backbone. And on top of that, we have the industrial layer. And this is where things get really quite interesting for me. Generally, the interest is here because, for instance, as said, we have humanoid robots that are being deployed in factories. For example, UB Tech, right? They signed a multi-million-dollar contract to deploy Walker 2 on the China-Vietnam border and so much more. So these are the three layers. Each of them is independent, but each of them adds to the overall picture of where AI in action in China is today. For the consumer, they are using AI every day, and many might not know it. They are speaking with Doubao on their phone. They kind of know it's AI, but by now it's not. Any app, everything is AI for them, right? It's really about personalization, gamification, and real problem solving. On the enterprise level, don't just get swiped away by the big names. The middle layer is implementing at huge phases. And then industrial level is the most important one for long-term sustained growth.
The three pictures that you just showed us is very thorough. What do you see China's real advantage lies?
If you talk about adoption or where the advantage is, of course, the scale of the market, the fact that we have open source models, the fact that the consumers are willing to hop on it and really use it because they've known nothing else but change, never ending change over the past 40 years. So they're not so stuck in their ways, etc., etc. Like the mindset, the never ending learning mindset of Chinese people that always want to upgrade. All of that, of course, contributes. The fact that the government has a plan and a plan that they actually execute. They announce it in advance. They execute. And I'm not just talking about central government, local governments, right? That actually help your business to get, funding, tax breaks, or once the supply chain comes together to plug into that supply chain easier. So all of these are what make it quite unique.
Where do you see the strongest adoption?
So, and when it comes to adoption, so to be honest, it depends on what you mean by strongest in adoption. For example, by penetration, the consumer is the king, right? As we said, by penetration, the internet sector in China is 89% penetration across the country. So everybody who is old enough and who has a phone, everybody has a phone, right, is in there. By impact, the most underreported story is, as I mentioned before, industrial AI. So by impact, the strongest part of China is really the, let's say, manufacturing, the supply chain, the consumer economy, the product innovation, etc. And by the strategic importance, I think China's strongest is really its industrial layer. The chips, the compute, the energy, the models that run efficiently on this constrained, let's say, hardware. That is definitely what makes China quite unique, and strategically it is the most important.
Interesting, because the industrial level also relies heavily on government's actions. So the Chinese government is all in AI now. You can see when the government puts its might into it in the right direction, everything moves very fast. And talking about the robotics, this year's the Chinese New Year gala, robots are really doing the kung fu and flips, and the whole world was impressed by it, comparing the performance with the previous year's robots, where they could barely walk. So what is really happening in China's robotic space? Are they really that good? What is information that you see on the front line?
So there are a few layers. The first layer is the hardware is quite good. By now, we are agile, we are fast, we're light, we're strong. So the hardware is getting there, and it is getting there because Chinese robotic space, especially if we talk about humanoid robots, they were developed on the layer of EV might. So everything that China has done for 5 to 10 years before in order to prepare for EV dominance globally has significantly supported us when we started building the humanoid and other robotic capabilities. So hardware is great. When it comes to software, it's not there. So if you see the robots dancing, walking on the street, etc., they are remote controlled toys very often, or pre-programmed performances. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's going to be no, humanoid robot army. There's going to be no, I do not know, caretaker who is going to enter our home in the next 2 years. I mean, that's not happening. Why? Because we do not have spatial AI to be able to make the hardware smart. In other words, if a ray of light is falling into the room, the robot doesn't know whether this light is real or not. It has no spatial awareness to that same level. So we would need a lot more training data. We would need a lot more information to get this, and there's also some technical limitations. The whole industry, not only in China but globally, is working on it, and I think we're going to resolve it, but it's probably going to, take some time. Then there's another layer, which is more of a, kind of industrial layer. So in closed industrial environments where you are manufacturing something, where you are working with dangerous goods, etc., there is already deployment. And we have rather inexpensive models, rather capable models that are already working in, let's say, car manufacturing facilities. This is only going to be more. And once we have smarter robots, China is also very good at making it cheap. So right now it's still, I mean, not crazy expensive, but it is quite up there. We will be able to drive prices down and scale very, very fast once some of the issues are solved. But basically, when it comes to industrial deployment, it's already started. It's only going to get more, and it's going to get more fast. Then there is a consumer layer. So why do we have robots walking down the street, and how is it helpful to have, for example, a policeman coordinating traffic, like a traffic policeman in Shanghai on the major junction? And why are they dancing during CNY? And a lot of people think that it is just a government's attempt to throw, I do not know, kind of ashes in front of people's eyes. And in reality, in my experience, this is the government aiming to prepare people for what's to come. They shall not feel awkward when the robot is there on the street. They shall feel comfortable once they get older, at the age of 80, that the robot is going to push their wheelchair. And that is why, kids, for the first time they saw a humanoid, right? They would be like taking pictures, they would be super excited. By now, they're like, okay, I've seen that, been there, and they're not afraid. So that barrier, that mental barrier, that psychological barrier, that I think is going to completely shock the world and consumers around the world. I mean, look at Europe, right? It is likely going to be a big, also, barrier to adoption. China is slowly and gradually massaging into people's minds already today.
If I ask you to just show us, what do you think the world is underestimating the most about China in the tech space? And what is the overestimate about China?
Underestimating. I think it probably is the speed of the hardware-software integration loop. So everybody's talking about China's AI models, right? We hear about it all the time. Oh, it's ByteDance's new model, or it's Alibaba's, or it's DeepSeek again, whatever it might be. But few people talk about what happens when those models are embedded in the physical hardware and embedded in real life scenarios. For example, in schools and hospitals, etc. I'm particularly interested and excited about the physical hardware, robots, EVs, factory equipment. For example, XPeng, right? One company. They are today building humanoid robots with 3 proprietary training AI chips. They are building a flying car, they're building an EV, and it's all the same company, right? So that is that. Another thing that people underestimate, I think, is Hangzhou. So it is the city. Everybody talks about, Shanghai and Shenzhen, etc. But I think Hangzhou, with, yes, there are 6 little dragons, but beyond that, there is a city that ultimately, in the last decade, was extremely globally relevant when it comes to research, from Zhejiang University to Alibaba's headquarters to government that gives 100% rent subsidies to tech studios. I think that is also quite not unknown, but deemed less important. And when it comes to something that's overestimated, I think at times it's just overhyped. Like people would, like for example, they see a humanoid robot, right, dancing during gala, and they would somehow imagine that these robots are coming home, these robots are not pre-programmed, these robots are so smart. So it just goes completely into that hype cycle where everything is exaggerated, and I think it is also because of the short videos, because of, again, some media or bloggers reporting about it in that light. So overhyped is really the impact of some of these new technologies like brain computer interface, like how good are Chinese AI chips, or how smart really and independent is the Chinese humanoid robot. And I'm not just talking about China. It's not the Chinese specific layer here. It's more
Yeah.
of in general, these technologies in general. Like, let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's
Yeah.
good and we are there, but it's not yet the future.
How about the AI infrastructure? We know that China is facing constraints around advanced chips and compute. And what are you seeing in China's response to that?
I think the response is quite strategic.
For example, DeepSeek was born
Mm.
out of the constraints
No,
being there.
absolutely. So ultimately, when it comes to AI and China, it has been a strategic priority for many years. And the chip restrictions and other geopolitical tensions that led to decoupling. And right now we are existing in two parallel universes. Like being, for example, here in Hong Kong, we can feel it very, very strongly, because you want to get onto Claude, you need a VPN because we're
Yeah.
excluded from that ecosystem. You want to get into some of the mainland Chinese apps, you also need a VPN, right? So we can actually feel the fire here. But China has right now been very much investing in, obviously, local domestic technology. It has made AI such top priority that, for example, if you're one of the key researchers in main companies, what your whereabouts must be declared by the firm. So if Vivi, you're working for, let's say DeepSeek, like you are being protected in some ways. In other ways, somebody can say that you are being observed, right? Because you are working in that very important strategic industry to lead the country into the future. So apart from that, of course, there is a huge competition. So it's not just orchestrated by the government. There's a huge competition internally. We remember, for example, when DeepSeek was released, just a few days later, all other models came, and DeepSeek released its model just before Chinese New Year, hoping that their competitors would take the break, because it's the biggest migration on earth, right? Everybody's going back home. But many teams, I think Alibaba team in particular, they locked themselves in, stayed for nearly 9 days, slept in the office, ate in the office, and pushed out a model right after Chinese New Year. So that internal competition, so it's really making a huge difference, from moonshot AI to all of the larger kind of firms. They are competing with former versions of themselves, also with each other, and also with global competitors. Definitely the fact that there's open source, the fact that they are not just trying to race towards AGI, but they are racing towards solving real problems. All that makes it very real for people and very motivational and very, I think, not just philosophically satisfying, but really, really kind of existential like meaning gives meaning to the whole industry, to the companies, and to people working in it. And all that creates, I think, quite a strong position for the future. So despite the challenges in many ways, and this has been reported, and it's not an original thought, yeah, in many ways, those restrictions pushed China to decouple, pushed China to go harder, go faster, and grow closer together, not only for China itself, but for the rest of the open sourced world. And I think it is working. It's working slowly, but definitely surely.
On the topic of open source, there's such an interesting perspective, because some people joke that China now has more open source AI models than the US. What is your take? Why is the open source thriving in China, and what does that signal?
Well, again, open source thrives in China because people are solving real world problems. They are not theoretical about something that's going to happen in 5 years only. They know AGI is the ultimate goal, and many are working towards it, but the route to it is through solving real problems. And in also my understanding, open source wins in adoption, always. The history of technology, of open platforms, they are always beating the closed one for development, for example, mindshare, because it's the whole world that co-builds with you, right? And DeepSeek, for example, when they released their models, right, under the MIT license, it was the most back then permissive open source license there is. Many other Chinese companies followed, and today what we're seeing is developers from Southeast Asia, from Latin America, from African continent, from the Russian-speaking world. They are all learning and getting kind of integrated. And when it comes to closed door and what let's say the US is doing, that of course they win in enterprise short term, right? So enterprises buy licenses, they want support, etc. But AI is developing just so fast, right? There's so much iteration. Everybody in the US is racing towards AGI because they believe there will be this one winner, that controls so to say, the world, like a mastermind who is so smart that's going to ultimately coordinate the world. And many things that I'm seeing in the US are also sometimes quite alarming, because if the real AGI is the outcome and suddenly we decide to integrate, let's say, OpenAI and Pentagon, yeah, and is it really for the betterment of the humanity, or is it for the betterment of just one country? And also, even if it is just for this one country, what are the ethics? What are the rules? What is it we are really deploying here? None of these questions were answered, but we are racing. We are racing because we need to be number one. So I think that I can't say paranoia, but that intense focus towards AGI. I think in China, at least the AI space that I'm plugged into, it doesn't exist at that same level of intensity. And that, in my humble understanding, given where ethics today are with the whole AI setup, it's a healthier approach. But it is what it is, and everybody is racing. Let's just hope that we're not racing to the bottom.
Open is better than closed. You brought up this really interesting point. What does the technology do for humanity? How do issues like trust, safety, and sovereignty play out in this space? And so what do you see that play out in China's ecosystem in AI?
Yes, when it comes to trust, I think more and more Chinese consumers are becoming aware of data and that they are the product. But the bargain was that you submit your data and you get excellent service and a lot of convenience rather than being spammed. That has worked. That barter has worked for Chinese consumer for the past decade, and I don't see why wouldn't it be working going forward. The quality of data, the also the kind of permissions, the fact that the ecosystems are all very well trained. So that is there. We do need to have a lot more regulation, and what I am consistently impressed by is that China is actually quite active, and it doesn't do a good job communicating it, but at the highest level, we're quite actively aiming to shape the ethics, aiming to shape some of the regulation. And in the country, everything happens a bit differently. For instance, we do not try to regulate an industry at its infancy. We wait until it grows to a certain scale. Like, for example, with shared economy, remember a few years back, everything was shared, bikes, umbrellas, power banks. So we let it thrive, right? There are thousands of bikes in every city. And then we come in and say, hey guys, we cannot really drop bikes on the side of the road, right? Then we try to regulate and see what actually will make a difference. So the same thing happens with advanced technologies such as AI, and later on, we already have some things for, obviously, humanoid robots. We have some things for quantum computing, for med tech, for space, etc., etc. So yes, trying to work, trying to regulate, trying to co-create and co-shape. These are such important topics. And I would really, really hope and wish that we would all come together, right? That Europe, that the US, that, Southeast Asia, Latin America, that the rest of the world comes together, and China, of course, being there also at the table. And we could make decisions, and we could understand what ethics is, what safety is, what to focus on as humanity. Because in my experience working in this industry, being surrounded by people that are at the forefront, we are either going to succeed together as humanity in the next decade or two, or we're going to fail together spectacularly as humanity, not as Chinese or Europeans or Japanese. We are going to go through this together as humanity. So it only makes sense to have that discussion when everybody's at the table.
Yeah, we're still at the early stage, but because the technology is advancing so fast, whether you regulate it when it's at its infancy or you let it bloom, and then you figure out the solutions along the way. Probably China is more open to the latter, the second kind of approach.
Absolutely. And for majority of technology that worked. For majority of technologies, they couldn't destroy us, they couldn't become autonomous, they couldn't. But when it comes to AI, this might be one technology that actually needs to be approached a little bit more carefully and differently. That is why I personally am I'm happy that China AI firms are not blindly racing. And it's also, I'm sure if they had chip capabilities and they had access, they probably would also do that. So let me not say they are only doing that because of their, moral high ground. No, but they are not doing it. I'm happy they're not doing it, racing towards AGI with the same, let's say, vigor and speed, because when we race towards it without any regulation, without communicating with each other, without common understanding of what good looks like, what are we actually trying to build here? What does it mean, human ethics, for who, right? Somebody in Africa might have very different understanding versus somebody sitting in Norway, right? So we are not racing in this part of the world, but towards AGI at the same speed. But it's happening in the US, so it means the whole world is racing. So we're all on that train. We cannot get off the train.
That's why the discussion and debate on what AI should do for humanity and how we should protect the human species is important. Just several days ago, Geoffrey Hinton make a point that he said, as we are approaching AGI, we as human, we may need to embed something like a caregiving instinct, like a maternal instinct into AI, so that AI would see us as their babies, right? So they would not harm humans. Back to your point, that's something that could be out of our hands. You are also an observer and researcher in the AI space. Do you think that care can be designed as a system property? Do you see anyone is holding that kind of moral ground?
Too many players, and everybody has their own version of reality and vision for the future. So there are some in the same company that have a moral compass. Whether it is the moral compass for humanity, I do not know. I don't believe that there exists one. We need to design it and develop. I do believe that we need to be raising AI like we are raising a child, and later on this child will become, as you said, the mother and look after us. But I do believe that it is extremely alarming. A lot of biases, a lot of information, a lot of outcomes that we are identifying as the desirable for these very powerful algorithms are ultimately at some point very, very soon they will be able to act independently in physical world. And then again, it's one of those technologies when it's not just a hammer, right? It's a hammer that can actually come and get that nail fixed. So a lot of people in our part of the world working in the space are very concerned. A lot of people working in the US and other markets are very concerned. So there's no question whether or not we are ready. We are not ready. But at the same time, everybody is in agreement that the train has departed. Everybody's running. So there is this quite naive hope that we as humans are going to work it out and we're going to catch it before it's too late. And there is hope, of course, but hope is not a strategy. So, in other words, I do not want to end this chat on a note of doom and gloom, but technology is, it's exciting. It has historically always led us to the next stage of development and prosperity. And this particular technology could, in fact, be a way to guarantee universal right prosperity and better health and better living conditions for all the people. We could be living in utopia in 20, 30, 50 years from now, but we also could destroy ourselves. For the first time, we have the tools to really eradicate humanity so fast and at scale. So it is a double-edged sword. I think what we can do is we shall work on bridging the world together. There's no China and then Indonesia and then the US and then France. There is one humanity. We need to have understanding of where do we want to take the world, where do we want to land in a few years from now, and then we need to build together. I really, really believe that this unity needs to happen now, and that's why we need more voices. We need people working with the right mindset in those fields. We need observers, we need keynote speakers, we need book authors, we need TV anchors who are not dividing, but bringing and putting and healing the world together, because ultimately it's all about us humans. Beyond humans, there is a whole planet that we need to look after. We have such a beautiful home, and we have a responsibility to protect it and to heal it and to make sure that it thrives. And broader than that, we have also responsibility, I think, for the universe, because we are the universe. We are a continuation of that life, and we are helping the world to figure out what it can become. So let's put our heads together, our hearts together, meet face to face, come and envision what this positive world could look like, and then let's work, each and everyone in our respective fields, on making it a reality. So that's how I choose to look at the current situation, and that's what keeps me going. And despite the fears, despite the the polarities, I really believe that if we do nothing, we're doomed. So let's do something and bring that better version of reality into being.
That's beautiful. Just like Elon Musk said, right? Be a cautious optimist and be the bridge. You are the bridge. What you're doing exactly bridging the world, the East and the West, and then bridging different sectors together. And we need more people like you. And let's talk about energy, because eventually people say that the competition of AI boils down to the competition on energy. China has invested heavily in energy. So what's your view on data center build up? Is that an area that global investors should pay attention to?
Absolutely. So this is also one of the most underrepresented stories in AI globally, not just in China. So training, obviously, an AI model consumes roughly the same amount of energy as 100 US homes use in 1 year. And running that model at scale, it basically is, I think, ongoing energy cost that compounds into cities or the whole countries. So it is absolutely huge. China's been responding to this challenge in two ways. First, efficiency. So many of the models are running more efficiently, such as DeepSeek. But also we are building out a lot of capacity. So we are building AI-specific data centers. We are building the world's largest new energy what's it called, center as well in China. We are doubling down on not only solar and wind and nuclear and whatnot. So when it comes to data centers, energy, and AI, it is all one story. One does not exist without the other, unless we fundamentally change the way technology is operating. And China is ahead when it comes to this energy story. well, the rest of the world is also waking up to that idea. And right now we see companies from, the rest of the world, the US, China, thinking about, let's say, some of the satellites that are drawing solar energy, etc., floating around the planet. So that is also one of the solutions that could potentially resolve the issue. But so far, it's really about building capacities on the ground, in the seas, to capture that opportunity.
If you could redesign one of the broken systems, healthcare, education, finance, governance, you name it, using the best of what China's tech ecosystem has built, what would you build and how? Or why?
All of the systems that you've mentioned are important. Probably the most meaningful one immediately is healthcare and education, and we are seeing huge deployment globally. And there is so much more opportunity. What I'm personally excited about is their personal layer, how you have an app where you can at 3 o'clock in the morning, take a picture of your rush and then get a consultation from AI doctor, and then with one click of a button have a call with a real doctor, and then get within an hour medicine delivered to your home. So that is already not in plans, but it's already deployed in places like China. Beyond that, the hospitals, I am very fascinated with the fact that we already have majority of the diagnosis in major large government clinics, for example. Again, in Chongqing, for instance, right, there is one of the largest hospitals in the whole of the of central China, and people from the province come in, thousands of people a day, and doctors are being assisted by AI algorithms. They only correct if something is a bit off, so it's dual loop. We are teaching, we are getting more efficient with the help of AI. And as you walk out of the hospital, you are getting, medicine dropped. As you are, for example, on operating table, more and more you have opportunity to opt out for, robotic kind of execution where the doctor is observing, or sometimes surgeries are also done, very rarely, but sometimes they are also done, with a doctor located thousands of miles away. I mean, that is already underway. What I'm really, really looking forward is how are we going to make it available for humanity, not only obviously in China, right, at all levels of society, and how do we roll it out in the rest of the world, and how do we focus on longevity, not just fixing diseases, but when Vivi is born, right, how do we make sure that there's personal medicine, there's understanding of you as a human holistically, and we are making sure that you're not just living longer, but you're living healthier, better lives, non-stop, right? And that is happening. Also, of course, the education sector needs to be transformed, because we are where we are with technology, and of course the skills that we are teaching kids, or the skills that were fit for the last 100 years, are not going to get us very far in the next 100 years. But that is also underway, and it's a much more philosophical and much more difficult question on how to change education and what to prepare for, because we have no idea. And we are ultimately crossing the river by touching the stones. That's one of the Chinese sayings, right? So we're basically figuring out as we go.
Beautiful. There's a lot of things that we could be looking forward to with the new technology. Besides technology, I know that you are also a big advocate of women empowerment. I watched your TED Talk on women empowerment that really resonated with me, and you build your brand and business in a foreign country. So what has it been like doing all of this in China as a woman?
It's been wonderful, because I'm in a space which at this stage has a bit fewer women than men. it is actually quite powerful because you become quite memorable, right? People see you one time and they will remember. And I think it is an advantage. I do believe that we need more, voices, more diversity, not only gender diversity, diversity of ideas, backgrounds, the diversity of points of view. And my experience has been is whenever you find yourself the minority, there is a way to look at it as being disadvantaged, or you being, in this hostile environment, it's hostile room. But I also believe it is a choice to look at it and say, you know what, this is my time. This is my time to shine, to add the perspective, to be memorable, to basically sit at the table. And I've always taken that latter approach, and it has worked really, really well.
You shared the story at your tech talk. You were the founder, and then some guys look at you and say, "Oh, the founder is a chick," kind of underestimating what girls can do. So, what was some of the biggest challenges along the way as a founder, and how did you overcome them?
Yes. So I was born in the last years of the Soviet Union, and my worldview was that girls were able to do absolutely anything. So my own family, my mom, she was working. She is still working, a university professor. Her sisters were all, a dean of a kindergarten and a dean of school. So they were all professionals. And we were also raised, at least in our bubble in the Soviet Union of, again, my family and my immediate circle, we were raised believing, again, it was not even a thing like women empowerment. It's just absolutely not existed, at least in my little
It's very
world.
natural,
And
right?
it
Like
was
having
very
very
natural, right? The movies were about, again, women running factories, and like the posters, right? Because after the Second World War, Soviet Union, out of ideology and also practical necessity, they needed women to step up and work in construction or be engineers and, run factories and whatnot. So I think all of that somehow, again, in my little bubble of the Soviet Union, was absolutely a norm. Going into the young Russia, many of those shadows of Soviet Union and the mindset, they just kind of carried over because Russia was going through a huge transformation and change. And then I left, when I left the country and went to study abroad. Again, you're a student, you're just living of your life. And later on, when I actually was in mainland China, I saw that it's not just powerful and strong women role models that we see here, but in China, more than 50% of small and medium-sized businesses were run by women. And you would go to any market and you would see that woman who knows how to name the price, how to bargain a price, how to get stuff done. They would be extremely entrepreneurial, extremely quick, and really good with money. So I was inspired by that. So it was my kind of Soviet layer, which was just about, okay, that's the norm. And then the commercial layer, unsurprisingly, the industrial layer, so to say, came from China, because Chinese people love commerce. They are real traders. We really love doing business. And then I became an entrepreneur in 2011. And as you said, yeah, I've built a business, and I was having some conversations with business people who were, more kind of, let's say from the Western world. And yeah, it was very unusual because they did not expect a woman to be in that role, to build a business in that space and to be as outspoken, apparently. So for me, that was probably around the age of, I don't know, the 23, 24, 25. Around that age, I started realizing, wow, the rest of the world actually might have had a different expectation, different experience, different set of worldview, which is fine, but it doesn't need to impact me. So I chose to, I never really bothered to explain differently. I believe that a lot of it comes with energy and presence. So just do your thing, run your show, and I think it's quite a productive way to get people understand and see things differently. So the challenges that I encountered in business, going back to your question, were not really linked to my gender or to the fact that I was a woman in tech, or the fact that I was a foreigner in, let's say, Greater China. I think all of those things, being an immigrant was a blessing. Being a woman in an industry which is male dominated was a blessing. And my mindset and my journey and my my experience, it was all a blessing. So the challenges that I experienced were business challenges. Yeah, clients coming in and dropping out. The fact that as a business owner, you have no, especially back in the day, right? Nobody really wants to talk to you because you don't carry a big brand name. So it takes time to build a community, to build your reputation, to build your industry kind of weight, right? The fact that, again, as a business owner, you're doing anything from cleaning toilets to, hiring people to closing leads. All of those challenges I went through, and it was a fantastic journey, and it is still a fantastic journey because our business is constantly evolving. But I do not choose to look at any of them as a specific gender question. But rather a normal business journey. And for all the women out there, you are kick-asses. Let's make sure that you use, if you ever find yourself in the rooms when you are not the parity, but you are a minority, use it as an advantage. It does work. A lot of it is in here, but not all, of course. We also need to make sure that we support each other.
That's exactly the mindset that should encourage and inspire all the ladies out there. The positive mindset, and don't put any limit on yourself. A lot of the challenges are not gender focused. Don't be a victim.
Absolutely. I think a lot of it is also coming, of course, from culture and the community. I'll give you an example. My mother-in-law, my husband is German. My mother-in-law, she had to give up her full-time job when my husband was born, because in Germany of that time, there was no support network where the child could go to a full-time kindergarten. When I was born, my mom was back to work 2 weeks after, because they could submit us to the nursery that would take care of us as young as a few months old. The whole day, while so a lot of it is cultural, a lot of it is coming from the real kind of support network and many other things. So there's no right or wrong, but we always have a choice. How do we use it? How do we use it in our life, and how do we view it? And another thing that I would like to leave our ladies with is build a community around you of other strong, powerful women. We are best when we come together, when we support each other, and we go places together, we lift each other up. And this is not a joke. Back in the day, there was so much talk. There were movies, there were all these themes about women competing for a man, competing for a job, competing for a spotlight. We are not competing anymore, because coming together, lifting together, elevating each other is truly, first of all, of our nature. It is in our nature, as human nature, not only women nature, it's human nature, because we thrive in communities. We need the community. And it is also extremely, I think, inspiring, because you're not alone on the journey. You're going, you're spotlighting. So find your tribe. If you don't have one, build your tribe, reach out to the tribe, and then go for it. We need you. Because as we said, as technology is going where it is, at a speed that it is going, we need more voices. And I do believe that the next stage of human development, the future is female. I do believe that that next stage of how we view life, how we want to who we want to become, is ultimately going to be shaped not only by outstanding men, but also by many outstanding women. So we need more of those women at all levels of society, from all parts of the world, coming together, holding hands, and getting stuff done.
That's so beautiful, Ashley. That has been such a inspiring and heartwarming conversation. And thank you for helping us see China beyond the headlines, and also those powerful words to support each other, to nurture each other. So for everyone watching, I'll include Ashley's links in the description below. Definitely follow her work if you want a clearer lens on China's innovation and technology in action. And if you enjoyed this episode of Vivi in the Valley, Tech with Soul, please like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs a more nuanced view of China and the AI era. See you next time.
Thank you, Vivi.